Hey everybody, I got a video here for you today, and I wasn't planning on making a video today, as a lot of days I don't plan on making videos and then I read something and I need to talk about it. But what I read last night, I don't think I've ever read anything that disturbed me more. That's what my video is going to be about today, but first of all, I've had messages and a few comments saying, hey, there is one other unfinished pyramid, very southern Saqqara, but I've already talked about that. This is a video I made 2 months ago, and it just said 10,000 subs, and I announced my new Egypt Pyramid series. And I just briefly talk about this southern Saqqara pyramid and how it strangely looks like the one at Abu Rawash. And I said I think we need to look at all the pyramids because I think there is an untold story here. Some of these look nothing like pyramids. And I think I was exactly correct. Now, since then, the last 2 months, I've had 15,000 subs and 1 million views on my channel, so man, that's something. I appreciate all my new subscribers and the interest in what I'm saying. But there is one other unfinished pyramid, and I haven't done the alignment, so if somebody wants to do that, but this is just a huge mystery. This southern Saqqara pyramid has tunnels, chambers, rooms, a hypogeum. And I'm not going to make another video on this because I've already discussed it recently, and I need to get on to some other subjects. As I promised, I've got some videos in the works that I'm really looking into. An important one on the Templars, and a Lost Crusade, and a mystery structure on an island that nobody has told you exactly what that really is yet. So those are videos I want to get to, but this video today, hugely important. Now, this mystery of this buried pyramid down at Saqqara, Semenket is the pharaoh it's attributed to. But we have a much deeper story here. Last night I was up reading about a lost pyramid at Giza. Strange accounts from a couple hundred years ago from more than a few people, and it's really confusing. And all of a sudden something popped up, and I took a look, and it had to do with this last unfinished pyramid I talked about. And I think this really got at me. Now, this is Zakaria Goneim, I believe that's how you pronounce it, and I mentioned him in my last video. But the story of this man needs to be told, and his position in history needs to be reestablished. What I read just sickened me. Now, Mr. Goneim, he wrote a book called The Lost Pyramid. He did excavations here in the 1950s, and this is the corner, I guess, of the unfinished pyramid. And this is just unbelievable, if you ask me. And I think I'm just going to read most of this here. It says, when Zakaria Goneim, a native Egyptologist, and his team excavated an outcropping of rubble masonry west of Djoser's step pyramid at Saqqara, they found theretofore undiscovered, unfinished pyramid in his book, The Lost Pyramid, Goneim wrote. It might be thought that since the building had been used as a quarry in later times, its existence was known until a comparatively recent date. Fortunately, I was able to satisfy myself that the monument had been undisturbed for at least 3,000 years, and probably for longer. Proof of this lay in a large number of later burials, which my workmen found during the excavations. As the earliest of these dated from the 19th dynasty, and that's roughly around, say, 1300 to 1200 BC. And as some were found lying undisturbed above the buried pyramid itself, it is obvious the walls had been uncovered had not been seen by human eyes since that remote epoch. And back in the 50s, there was, theories about how far back the Egyptian thing went, and I don't think they really had a clue yet, and they were just beginning to discover that. In January 1954, Goneim began his search for the pyramid entrance, certain that no superstructure, and that's exactly how Barsanti described the structure at Zayat al-Aryan, certain that no superstructure would have been built without beginning the substructure. Excavating the northern side, he found the remains of a mortuary temple. Encouraged, he sought the entrance there, as the entrance to Djoser's pyramid was found in a like location. When this proved futile, he moved the work to the north. Finally, about 75 feet from the pyramid face, he found what appeared to be the entrance gallery, and it's a massive descending shaft. It says, "My workmen and I were intensely excited. As we dug down into the sand and more of the trench became visible, it was clear that we were nearing the entrance to the pyramid's substructure. The question which worries us was, would the entrance be found intact, or would the tomb robbers have entered the pyramid before us?" And it goes on to say, "The gallery is blocked intermittently with thick masonry and the gaps between filled with rubble. At length the doorway to the pyramid was uncovered. To our extreme relief," Goneim wrote, "we found that the doorway was intact and sealed with masonry." And that to me is really proof that this place was undiscovered and they were the first to enter it. The pyramid was opened on March 9th, 1954. The door led into a high gallery cut into the bedrock, but within 60 feet they encountered a wall of rubble reaching from floor to ceiling. The team found a vertical shaft in the ceiling through which the rubble had been dropped. The mouth of the shaft was buried in the pyramid's superstructure. Goneim determined that the shaft had not been fully breached since the pyramid was built. Now, it seems they were doing observations, a vertical shaft in the ceiling, and then this place was buried by the builders. Do we have any other accounts of very, very ancient places used for astronomical observations and then buried? Well, of course, we have Göbekli Tepe coming from 12,000 years ago. Same story. Are those similar, connected? Well, that's a good question to be asked. Now, to get an answer, they had to clear this shaft, and this is where it gets highly disturbing. It was during the clearing of the shaft that a fatal accident occurred. One of the workers at the bottom of the partially cleared shaft was suffocated after he was buried when the rubble gave way beneath him. This stopped the work amid tales of a pyramid curse and exaggerated claims by the press that 80 men were killed when the pyramid had entirely collapsed. Now, the press in Egypt, how long ago? 70 years ago, was putting out tales that 80 men were killed when the pyramid had entirely collapsed, when it was a vertical shaft, the rubble gave way and suffocated one man. Now, after that tragedy, excavations began again, and this is what they found. It says, under a thick layer of clay at the bottom of the corridor, beyond the blockage, the workers found hundreds of stone vessels of many kinds, similar to those found in the subterranean galleries of Djoser's pyramid. They also found gold bracelets and armlets, a gold wand, cosmetic box in the shape of a scallop shell that was made entirely of gold, and other things. It was theorized that they likely had been in a wooden chest, long rotted away. They didn't even know what this thing was, and they realized it was rotted wood because it had been there so long. That may have belonged to a lady of the king's household. This evidence, Goneim wrote, provided us with a valuable clue to the fact that, in spite of its unfinished state, the pyramid had been used for a burial. He brushed aside notions that the items had been abandoned by tomb robbers of antiquity. And really, when you think about it, there was no tomb robbers in here. There was gold lying all around, easily carried away. It says this by Goneim. My answer to such critics is this. The objects were found under a thick layer of clay. The stone bowls, dishes, etc. had been carefully arranged in layers with the clay above them as protection, and above this clay the builders had piled huge stones of blockage which had been thrown down the shaft to fill it. That blockage, I am convinced, had never been disturbed, since the shaft was made by the pyramid builders. Therefore, the objects, including the gold jewelry, must have been left there deliberately, and not discarded by robbers. In any case, why would tomb robbers have left behind such valuable and easily portable objects as gold bracelets and other trinkets, which had lain in a wooden casket, traces of which still remain? So to me, as I'm reading this, I'm thinking, my God, this guy found something that hadn't been disturbed since whoever built this, and I think it goes way farther back than the dynastic Egyptians. It says, later jars were found with clay seals bearing an imprint made with a cylinder seal. Upon them Goneim read the name of an unknown king. And it says Sekhemket, This king had actually been known by another name, Josertati. So, this king is unidentified by the king's list available to these guys in the 1950s. Unknown king. So, to me, this just hints this is a pre-dynastic king, part of the king's list that Egyptologists say is a fairy tale, but it's part of the same list they use for the chronological order of their pharaohs. Now, it goes on to say in his book, and I think the book is called The Lost Pyramid, so if anybody wants to look that up or get it, I think there is an amazing tale in that book. But it says, other things found. After a door was breached, was a gallery containing 120 storage magazines. And those are just little chambers. 16 more were later found. The entire complex was filled to about 2/3 its height with rubble. Beyond this, some 236 feet distance from the pyramid entrance, a seemingly impervious mass of rock was encountered. Somewhat disheartened, and working beyond April, the usual end of the excavation season, work slowly progressed into the heart of the newly discovered and apparently undisturbed pyramid. On the 31st of May, 1954, beyond 10 feet of blockage, Goneim climbed into the darkness of a large vault, accompanied by one of his lead workmen, Hafni. In the middle of a rough-cut chamber lay a magnificent sarcophagus of pale, golden, translucent alabaster. We moved towards it. My first thought was, is it intact? Hurriedly, with my electric torch, I examined the top for a lid. But there was no lid. The top was of one piece with the rest. The sarcophagus proved to have been carved from a single alabaster block. The only opening was a sliding panel at one end, slid into position from the top. The decayed remains of a wreath sat on top of the sarcophagus, and years later analysis proved it to be bark and decomposed wood. The chamber, never completed, was surrounded by a complex of unfinished galleries. No entrance other than the excavated passage could be found. At last, Goneim wrote, I was able to satisfy myself beyond any shadow of a doubt that we were the first to enter the sarcophagus chamber since its makers left it. A close examination proved that the sliding door to the sarcophagus was sealed and bore no traces of tampering. For the first time in modern history, an intact royal burial had been discovered within a pyramid. Now, this is what Mr. Goneim discovered in what was pretty clearly an undiscovered tomb, a golden, translucent alabaster sarcophagus with a sliding panel built right into the top. That is clearly one of the strangest things I have ever seen. The sliding top was built right into it. And alabaster, I know, is softer, I believe, a lot softer than granite. But what is the purpose of the alabaster? This just boggles my mind. Now, this is where it goes from just incredibly fascinating to heartbreakingly tragic. It says, world press interest was high, and the find was compared to the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb. Visitors were plentiful, and Goneim found himself in the spotlight of publicity. The impending discovery of the royal mummy was eagerly anticipated by Egyptologists of the day. And this, whatever this was, this sarcophagus, this alabaster sarcophagus, was totally sealed. Clearly, there was no evidence of it being opened previously, so that they thought they were going to find an Egyptian mummy similar to Tutankhamun's. But there was nothing Egyptian on it. No, sarcophagus of Egyptian pharaohs and such are totally covered in hieroglyphs and images and cartouche and scarabs and other things. It says the press were first admitted on June 17th, and as many as 60 journalists lingered. Finally, preparations for the opening of the sarcophagus were complete, and on the 26th of June, ropes were threaded through steel hooks inserted into 2 holes at the top of the sliding panel as lights and cameras were placed in position. As the small party watched, crowbars were inserted into the crack beneath the sliding panel and workmen pulled mightily on the ropes. At first, when opened, it was wedged tightly into position, sealed with gypsum plaster. But then it began to move, at first only an inch, but bit by bit, flakes of plaster dropping to the floor, it slid upward. Falling to his hands and knees, Goneim peered inside, eager to witness the culmination of his considerable efforts, and they were years of efforts. But the sarcophagus was empty. And literally, Goneim, in my opinion, did not know that this was a crucial turning point in his life. It says public interest immediately ceased with the news headlines such as the Pharaoh fiasco, and they dig for 3 years and find nothing. It was for Goneim a bitter blow, and his name quickly faded into relative obscurity. He was later accused, falsely as it would turn out, of stealing antiquities and smuggling them out of the country, and as a result he suffered the humiliation of repeated police interrogations. Now here is a pic from his book, and if anybody wants to look into this book, just go ahead. But this man obviously found something absolutely incredible, and his life depended on if there was an Egyptian mummy in here, or a pharaoh. This is just a sad fucking story. Now, upon his initial discovery, and he wrote the book, and he went on a lecture tour, and he talked about his amazing discovery, and it was an amazing discovery, but it seems back in Egypt, a smear campaign was launched, and they really didn't want this information getting out. Now, Goneim was ridiculed, and he was obviously shattered. I think just a huge injustice was done. And he says this: why would an undisturbed burial chamber contain a sealed but empty coffin? Shortly after opening the sarcophagus, Goneim had concluded, I feel fairly certain that the chamber I discovered beneath the new pyramid is another example of a dummy tomb or ritual burial. No other explanation will fit the facts unless other evidence is produced to contradict it. I shall continue to accept it. If this hypothesis is correct, it would explain why other kings of this remote period, for example, Sennacherib, built 2 pyramids. Now, a little earlier in this video, I call it a tomb, but it seems the sarcophagus is symbolic, but we seem to have relics left by the original builders, and all indications lead me to believe this. So, this is most fascinating, and the mystery just deepens, but you can kind of see how maybe the dynastic Egyptians, how they buried their dead, kind of evolved out of this time period. Now, Mr. Goneim here made one of the most important discoveries ever made in Egypt. I think it was a pre-dynastic tomb of some people who would eventually be called pre-dynastic Egyptians. He was ridiculed. He was interrogated constantly by the police for what? Making an incredible discovery. Just because there was an Egyptian mummy in this sarcophagus, this incredible, amazing sarcophagus. He was ridiculed. He was accused of stealing some certain things, and one of those things was later found by his friend, Jean-Philippe Lalor. Where? In the Egyptian Museum of Antiquities. That's where the item was found that police said he took, and he was destroyed. And in January of 1959, Zakaria Goneim's body was found under the most suspicious of circumstances in the Nile River. Hope you thought this was interesting. And you all have a very nice day.